Today I want to talk about two very important concepts in cultural anthropology, ethnocentrism and cultural relativism. Ethnocentrism is the belief that one's own culture is superior to all others. It means viewing the rest of the world through the narrow lens of one's own cultural perspectives. Cultural relativism is the notion that any part of a culture, such as an idea, thing, or a behavior pattern, must be viewed in its proper cultural context, rather than from the viewpoint of the observer's culture. And this is very important because as cultural anthropologists, we want to be able to understand a culture on its own terms and not through the lens of our own experience. So, if you look at this first image, you see a woman wearing what's called a hijab. And a hijab in Islam is the garment that women wear over their heads. There are variations on this. Niqab is the garment that covers also the woman's face. Now, if you see this, you may have certain preconceptions about what the hijab means. You may think that this woman is a victim of a male-dominated society, that she is a participant in a backwards-looking ideology. You may think that she's forced to wear the hijab, when it's more likely that this woman chooses to wear the hijab as a symbol of her devotion to God. And we have precedents for this. We understand that certain women, in our culture, nuns, for instance, wear a head covering to show their devotion to God. So this is understood and sort of seen as natural and correct in our culture, whereas some Westerners may see a Muslim woman wearing a hijab or a niqab and see it as something that's backwards. So in some Arab countries, women wear head coverings or even face coverings to show their devotion to God. They choose to do so, right, without coercion. And you may see them, in fact, alongside women wearing bikinis, such as this scene from Alexandria, Egypt. It should be said that in some Arab or Muslim countries, women are forced to wear the hijab. In Afghanistan, in Iran, and in Saudi Arabia, women are forced to cover to some degree. Now, by the same token, a Muslim woman, say from Afghanistan, may see this image of Miley Cyrus and wonder why she's wearing her underwear on television, right? She may have no proper cultural context to place this in, right? She may not know that the Video Music Awards are a place to push boundaries with regards to clothing and sexuality, or a place to be edgy. A woman in Afghanistan may have no concept of what edgy means. Okay. Again, we have plenty of examples of women covering their hair in our own societies to show their devotion to God. Amish and Mennonite women, for example, will cover their hair. Here's another image of a woman doing something that you don't ordinarily think women who wear the hijab do. This woman is a sniper in the Syrian town of Aleppo. She's one of these Syrian rebels that you hear about on television. Now, you can also take these ideas, ethnocentrism and cultural relativism, and apply it to food. We may think that our culture's notions about what is appropriate food are sort of normal and correct, but if you really look at them, they actually become sort of strange, right? So we see eating chicken nuggets and chicken sandwiches as something that's sort of normal and natural and correct, but if you really dig down deep into the way our food is produced, you find this it's actually kind of strange. Modern chickens are produced in, they reach a full size in 47 days. Their meal, the food that they're fed often contains things like caffeine and estrogen mimickers or hormones and so on. And it's actually very strange if you look at it from sort of a detached perspective. Back to the veil again. Many of the women in the class will eventually wear a veil on their wedding day, and we see that as something normal and natural and appropriate and right, because we have sort of a context for it. We have a frame for it. Back to food. So you may think, for example, that eating sushi, eating raw fish is something that's strange, and you would never think about doing it, think it's gross because you're sort of ethnocentric when it comes to raw fish, and that's okay. But you should know that for the Japanese, it's perfectly normal and natural and right, and for an increasing number of Americans to eat things like raw fish, right? So it's also, well, I'll give you another example with regard to food and then we'll be done. In some parts of the world today, in China, Korea, and Vietnam, it is still the case that people will eat dog meat, for instance. Now, this seems to us, well, to many of us, you would see this as disgusting, absurd, because dogs are seen as domestic animals, well, not even domestic animals, they're seen as companion animals, right? They're seen as our friends or members of our families and not food. But there's nothing sort of intrinsic about a dog that makes it a companion animal or a pet rather than a food source. Now, I'm going to show you two images. One of these is dog meat and the other is beef. Can you tell the difference? Can you tell which is which? Actually, this one is dog and this one is beef. Now, and I told you it was the opposite, right? You probably would have had sort of a, repulsion. You would have felt repulsion. You would have felt disgusted at one or the other had I tricked you and tried to show you the beef and told you it was dog. And that's what culture does to us. Culture can make us feel that way. Ethnocentrism can make us feel that way. We can look at other people's cultures, practices, ideas, and feel repulsed by it, even though it's sort of arbitrary. It's just because the way we were raised, we don't see dogs as food. We see them as pets. Okay. Now, it should be said that cultural relativism does not necessarily imply moral relativism, right? These are two different things. Just because you want to understand culture on its own terms doesn't mean that you have to accept that culture as morally correct, right? You don't have to accept that particular cultural practice as morally correct. You can still go on and see eating dog as sort of morally wrong, or eating all animals is morally wrong. That's up to you. But if you're going to be an anthropologist, you need to apply cultural relativism, which means understanding a culture practice on its own terms, not necessarily putting your moral compunctions on that practice, being able to step outside of your own view of the world, your own lens on the world, to step outside of your own biases and see why people may do things in the way that they do them. Okay, so that's the idea. One of the ideas in anthropology is that we want to make the strange familiar and the familiar strange, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to do in this course, right? So to some of you, this looks strange, but this is familiar, but they're both sort of the same thing, and hopefully I've gotten you to see that.